What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to a free writing session episode, number 118 of the Spun Today Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz. Thank you very much for listening. In this episode, I share my December 2018 writing stats, a writing tip that I picked up along the way. I share a Spun Today questionnaire submitted by fellow writer, Miss Writer YL Gorman. I tell you about what I've been reading. And finally, read and reflect on some of my free writing, which is located at, you guessed it, spuntoday.com/free writing. But first, just a quick word on how you can help support the Spun Today podcast. If you're new to the podcast and would like to support, a cool way to do so is to sign up to my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter called the Midday Monday Boost Letter. I send it out every Monday at noon, and it contains 5 things: a featured photograph of the week, podcast of the week, video of the week, quote of the week, and word of the week. If you're interested, it's completely free, and you can sign up at spuntoday.com/subscribe. Today's writing tip comes from an article written by James Clear. Aside from agreeing with a lot of the points of the article, I think it's fitting to these free writing session episodes that I share with you guys, and thought you might find it useful as well. As always, I will link to the article in the episode notes, so check it out. The article is titled "The Surprising Benefits of Journaling One Sentence Every Day." Now, that may sound like a facetious title, but I assure you it is not. I know, at least for me, I benefit from incremental changes that I can measure over time and build upon. Even if you start with something really small. For writing in general, for example, it's good to have a schedule. It's great to try to hold yourself to writing routines and rituals, and pretty much whatever it is that gets you to do what it is that you want to do. Whether it's writing or any other hobby or interest that you have, or work that you actually need to do. But as I well know, and as I'm sure a lot of you do as well, no matter how many things we put in place, sometimes you just can't get to it. You just can't get yourself to write. You just can't muster up the drive, the gumption, the motivation, or what have you, to actually write, even if it's one sentence a day. You know, sometimes you go long stretches, you go a week, 2 weeks without writing or doing that thing that it is that you want to be doing. So definitely do not poo-poo the idea just based off of the title. If it's something that sounds like, one sentence, what the hell am I going to do with one sentence? There are benefits to it, which I'll get into some. And above all else, I think, at least for me and from my personal experience, it's a tool like any other that you can use to snowball into writing a paragraph and then into writing a page, etc. You know, you build momentum, but start with something manageable. All right, so there's a bunch of different points, or he lists out benefits of journaling, even if it's one sentence a day. And I'm going to read you a couple. And then he has like excerpts, or not excerpts, he has like paragraphs underneath each point where he elaborates on them. So I recommend you guys go and read the full article in its full context like I usually do. These are just some gems and takeaways that resonated with me and that I'm going to share with you. By the way, I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so apologies in advance for the way that I sound, and trying to pause the record every time I have to like cough or clear my throat and shit like that. But apologies for any of those that sneak through as well. So the first point that I liked was journaling provides the opportunity to learn new lessons from old experiences. And beneath that, he writes, reading your old journal entries is a bit like reading a great book for a second time. you pick up on new sentences and see the past in a different way. Only this time, you are rereading the story of your life. And that's one of the things that I found fitting to what I do here with these free writing session episodes, where I go back and read some of my free writing, whether it's from a month ago or 3 or 4 years ago, and just many times it's the first time that I'm rereading that particular passage since I wrote it. And it very much so is interesting to me to see where my head was at that particular point in time, and just to compare and contrast, how I've grown, how I haven't grown, or how much my views on a particular topic may have changed and evolved. So there's one benefit to picking up a journaling habit. The next one is journaling sharpens your memory. And he wrote, my journal provided the who, what, how, when, and why with a specificity that memory might have blurred. But it also did something more. It offered me a frank and unvarnished portrait of myself at 26 that I couldn't have found anywhere else. Time will change your face without you noticing, but it will also change your thoughts without you realizing it. Our beliefs shift slowly as we gain experience, and journal entries have the ability to freeze your thoughts in time. In particular, what stood out to me from this benefit is the fact of being able to read a frank and unvarnished portrait of yourself from yourself. As he said, the journaling provided a who, what, how, when, and why with a specificity that memory might have blurred, which is true, right? I mean, think about, memory from 2 months ago, let alone 15 years ago. Memories are shaky. It also stood out to me in that I like, and actually recently realized, somebody brought it to my attention when we were talking about books that we've read and stuff like that, and they were like, so you like memoirs? And I was like I stopped for a second, and I was like, I guess I do. Because, for example, I'm reading now, which I'll mention later, Angie Martinez's memoir, and I've read Stephen King's On Writing, which is quote, memoir on the craft. Excellent read, especially if you're into writing. And what else? Charlemagne the God's first book, Black Privilege, which I've spoken about in the past, and have found myself often thinking, like, while I'm reading those books, like, damn, how do they remember like all these stories, and how are they able to like retell them like so vividly? And although we can't really know somebody else's process when it comes to something like that, like, for sure, but I know for me personally in the future, if I would want to write a memoir or stories based on my life or something like that, there are a couple things I would go back to, which is my free writing, which is a form of journaling, and this podcast, which has always been, like I've said from the beginning, one of the underlying purposes of the podcast is to chronicle my career from a struggling writer to and actually I wouldn't even say struggling writer. It would probably make more sense to say someone who's into writing and trying to figure it out, to becoming a ... I don't know, but the future will tell. Time will tell. But anyway, you guys are along with me on the ride, right? And so in that way, journaling is definitely beneficial. Two last points that stood out to me from this post and my writing tip for this episode are: journaling motivates you to make the most of each day. The thought process behind that is, if you know that you're going to be writing one sentence for the day or one entry for the day, it kind of motivates you to make sure that you have a productive day so you have some positive shit to actually speak about. And the last point is that journaling provides proof of your progress. This point also resonated with me in that how I share my writing stats, for example, with you guys as a way to keep myself honest, and I record that's how I record my progress in terms of writing. So it's not specifically journaling, but it's a form of recording progress. And I can definitely see how journaling in and of itself can be. All right, so like I said, check out the full article for some more insight into the benefits of journaling, as well as there's a few handful of writing prompts in there to get you started. There's a few tips on how to make journaling a habit, an actual habit that you can keep and sustain, etc., etc., etc. Again, it's linked in the episode notes, but the name of the article, if you just want to Google it, is The Surprising Benefits of Journaling, One Sentence Every Day, and it's by James Clear. Clear. Next up are my December writing stats. I rounded off the year of December 2018, and I wrote 25 out of the 31 days of the month. That's an 80.6% success, quote unquote, rate. So I'll pat myself on the back. Finished off fairly strong for the year. And I am making great progress on my debut novel, which I promised you guys will be out and is still on track to be out in Q1 2019. The working title is Fractal, which I've told you guys before. And I don't know why I keep calling it a working title, as if I'm going to have some sort of epiphany right before publishing, where I'm going to just change the title of the book. I think it's safe to say that that will be the title of the book. And once it's released, obviously you guys will be the first to know. And I'm sure I'll record an episode dedicated to the book and just the life cycle of that specific process. So stay tuned. Next up is what I've been reading. And that is, I told you guys last free writing session episode that I was like in the middle of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. And I mentioned that he's a Canadian clinical psychologist and a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. He does lean a little on the religious side, which I'm not saying is a good thing or a bad thing. Just pointing it out because it is obvious. But he purports using religious stories and myths because they are mechanisms for delivering deeper moral truths. And he thinks that they are good vehicles for doing just that. I think he's a great thinker. I've listened to tons of debates of his and just talks in general, a bunch of podcasts. He's a great modern thinker and deeply thoughtful with what he does. His book is a bit of a dense read, but definitely readable, definitely followable. Are either one of those words? Readable is, right? Followable, not too sure. And towards the end, there's a quote or just something he says, something he finishes a chapter with, a line that just in and of itself really, really hits home. And I just had like a visceral connection to it. And I'll share that with you guys right after I tell you what the 12 rules are. And again, the title of the book is 12 Rules for Life. And there's a bunch of different things in there. And I'm just going to read you guys what the 12 rules are according to Jordan Peterson. to give you an idea of what the book's about. Number 1 is stand up straight with your shoulders back. Number 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. That's an important chapter. I think we, those of you that are more on the selfless, like giving side, don't lose sight of yourself either. You can't help others unless you help yourself, and you should treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Number 3, befriend people who want the best for you. Number 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That's another good one. Don't focus on comparing yourself to others. Don't focus solely on who you want to be. Focus on who you were yesterday and give yourself a contrast of what you're doing in the moment to better yourself versus who you were yesterday. And like we were speaking about earlier, journaling 1 sentence a day at least helps there, or just journaling in general. Read about something from 3 weeks ago and see how you of today compares to then. Number 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. There's some pretty salient parenting advice throughout the book, and that rule number 5, which is, I believe the rules coincide to like chapters. So that chapter or whatever, that section that goes over this is a good one. He speaks about things like helicopter parents that, the kids cry and they give them everything that they want, and then they wind up resenting their kids, and that's just an indication that you're allowing them to do something that makes you dislike them, and other people are going to feel the same way. Like you're reinforcing a behavior that to someone else, to like a friend or a boyfriend or girlfriend in the future, they are a brat with, or they are spoiled, or to an employer in the future, they're the employee that complains about having to work 15 minutes of overtime, or to a customer in the future, if they are some sort of entrepreneur or something like that, become the asshole that doesn't take care of their customer. You're like reinforcing those types of traits at a young age that snowball into socially consequential things in their adult life. Number 6, set your house in order before you criticize the world. So basically, don't throw stones in a glass house. Have your shit together before you start pointing the finger and looking for holes in other people's game and just bitching and complaining about anyone else before you yourself have your shit in order. Number 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. 9, assume whoever you're listening to knows something you don't. That's another good one. I've always been of the mindset that anybody can teach you something, regardless of who they are, regardless of who you are. And if you're willing to listen or pay attention, you'd be doing yourself a favor. Because when you least expect it, somebody will drop some shit on you and blow your mind. Number 10, be precise in your speech. That's a good one for me. I should re-listen to that. I'm definitely not precise in my speech. I often find myself being either misinterpreted or literally having the opposite of what I intend be the understanding of a conversation, for example. I'm much more precise in writing. Number 11, do not bother children while they are skateboarding. I really like this one. This one is pretty much the theory behind, let your kids fall and break their arm type of thing. Don't be a helicopter parent. You don't want to coddle them 100%. You don't want to obviously let your kid drown or something like that, but you also do not want to baby them to the point that they're not prepared to go into the world when realizing that it's not completely nerfed like their childhood and upbringing was. And number 12, pet a cat when you encounter one in the street. I personally don't recommend that one. Now, the last thing that I'll say about Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, which I will link to in the episode notes. The last thing is what I said I had such a visceral connection to, which is, and I quote, aim to be the person in your father's funeral that everyone in their grief and misery can rely on. I'll say it again one more time because I think that's so good, so deep, so meaningful. Aim to be the person in your father's funeral that everyone in their grief and misery can rely on. Like, to me, that encompasses so much. That encompasses being selfless enough to not be caught up in your own grief in a time of loss, such as the death of a loved one, and to be present and compassionate enough so that others that are going through their grief and misery can rely on you. And whether that be just for companionship or being a shoulder to lean on, to cry on, someone to speak to, someone to take care of the logistics of, events like that, like funerals and everything that, goes along with death. It's also about having the strength to be able to step up to the plate and be that person. It's about honoring the person that has passed and being strong and being a pillar and not letting their passing completely crumble the lives of their loved ones as well as yours. It's also about the way it's phrased, specifically coming of age, of stepping up to the plate after the loss of your father or loved one. There's just so much in there, in that one phrase, that instantly just resonated. So yeah, it was a pretty dope read, and I recommend it. Again, the book is called 12 Rules for Life, subtitled An Antidote to Chaos, and it's by Jordan B. Peterson. And again, I link to it in the episode notes. Check it out. What I'm currently reading now, which I'll give, I guess, a more elaborate feedback on in the future once I'm finished with it, like I normally do, but just to give you guys a heads up of what I'm reading now, is Angie Martinez, her memoir, which is titled My Voice. And so far, I am almost midway through, and it's such a dope read. A lot of hip-hop stories. Those of you that don't know, Angie Martinez here in New York is, and not just in New York, I mean, she's like nationally syndicated, but she's widely regarded as like the voice of hip-hop, the queen of hip-hop radio. And her memoir tells her story like memoirs do. And I love to see, I'm into how the sausage is made stories, the grind, the come up. And this is chock full of those types of stories. Like her always being into hip hop and sneaking out of her house and going to like house parties and stuff like that when hip hop first started coming on the scene, and living in the Heights uptown, and then living in the Bronx, and cutting school and playing hooky and smoking weed with her friends, getting into trouble that way, but always having this constant in her life of hip hop, this passion. And then jumping to, her first starting to get some money, and she moved to Forest Hill, Queens, to a building that I'm familiar with called The Pinnacle. And she was just so like disorganized and all over the place that she wound up getting evicted from there because she like came from not much and just didn't know how to just organize her shit. Just like grow up and, organize your shit and pay bills and stuff like that. And she got evicted twice, actually. She was living in Astoria also, and just like a lot of like hip hop stories that I hadn't heard before of New York artists like Biggie and Q-Tip and Jay-Z, Nas, Tupac flying her out to LA during the Biggie and Tupac, East Coast West Coast beef, and giving Angie like an exclusive interview as a rep of the East Coast. And it's like a really, really dope read. I'm really enjoying it. But that's what I am reading now, and I will tell you guys more about it once I finish. Next up is the 5-question Spun Today questionnaire response submitted by fellow writer Yvette Gorman, aka Miss Writer, aka YL Gorman. You can follow her on Twitter at The Improviser, which is also linked to in the episode notes. All right, let's get into it. For those of you that don't know, the Spun Today questionnaire is a 5-question, open-ended question for fellow writers or creatives of any sort that are interested in sharing some of their feedback and having them shared here like this on the Spun Today podcast. It is open to each and every one of you folks, and if you're a bit on the shy side, you can also choose to remain anonymous, but we're all friends here, right? If you want to check out the questions, you can find them at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. All right, let's read Yvette's responses. Question number 1. Relating to your craft, do you remember the first thing you ever wrote or created? If so, what was it? And Yvette responded, I remember in secondary school, high school, I wrote a horror story called The Disappearance. I was obsessed with horror stories, and I just had an idea, and I went with it. I was writing part of it in my English class when my classmates asked what I was doing and asked to read it. They loved it. It was a real head-swelling experience. That's pretty cool to have that type of experience. Either you're a natural, really good writer, and or you had some really cool, non-douchey classmates. Either way, it's definitely encouraging to have support like that, especially when you're being vulnerable and putting yourself out there with something so like intimate, something that's so like a part of you, like it's something that came from you. And having it be accepted is just a dope thing. And the fact that they loved it, even better. I remember in high school having a English teacher, shout out to Miss Gitlitz, that used to assign these things called lit logs. Lit is short for literature. And it was, like just like short passages based on something that we were like reading in class or just like writing exercises. And she would always encourage me and always tell me how much she looked forward to reading mine. And I don't know if she told everybody in the class that or not, but I definitely felt special, and that was definitely encouraging. And she would like write back like these long paragraphs of feedback, not just like with technical things that I got wrong or like corrections, misspellings and stuff like that, but just like commentary on my writing and stories of her own that my writing made her think about and triggered thoughts in her. And it's like it's an encouraging thing when, again, you share something and it's accepted in a positive way. All right. Question number 2. What inspires you to write or create? And Yvette responded, I started writing to basically escape reality. I create a new world, one where I wasn't unwell, one where I didn't suffer pain, and I often did escape. I get inspiration from the strangest places. I couldn't say for sure what actually inspires me, but I write mostly from experiences. First off, I'm sorry to hear that you were unwell and hope you're doing better. And if that's not in actuality and you are still feeling unwell, and I don't want to pry or anything, but I hope that the suffering at least subsides and you are able to continue to find inspiration in the strangest places and take yourself away from those bad feelings. And I definitely co-sign on the inspiration coming from experiences. That's a big thing, right? You know, living life and experiencing life to be able to take in and recreate through your creativity your interpretation of different experiences. We're all a microcosm of life as seen from our vantage point. Question 3. What is a hobby that you have that is unrelated to your craft? And Yvette responded, I used to do a lot of photography. I mainly photographed models. I loved it. I don't do much of it anymore because I have a progressive condition which has worsened over the years. Another hobby I did but don't get to do anymore is scuba diving. I am a licensed underwater photographer. Sadly, I don't do either. So my main everything is writing. Well, I guess that there clarifies my question from earlier regarding the progressive condition, and very sorry to hear that it's worsened over the years. I have some exposure personally to progressive conditions with my wife having MS, but it hasn't been, thankfully, anything that has debilitated her from doing something that she's passionate about. So, you know, although it is limiting in certain ways, it hasn't been to that extent. So I can just imagine how rough it is. And although you're not able to do the scuba diving, which honestly sounds scary as shit to me, I did snorkeling once and it was pretty cool, but I can't imagine like scuba diving and going like deeper than, you know, a foot or two below the surface. It's just fucking scary. But if you're into it, right? And I'm sure things look amazing down there. And being a licensed underwater photographer must be cool. I'm into photography as well, but it's mainly like landscape photography. And, you know, I'm like the guy at a party with the camera, you know, trying to get active live images of people. So I don't have like the same taste, I guess, for photography, you can say, in terms of like photographing models. But still, I totally get that. So yeah, although you aren't able to do those things anymore, I'm super happy that you still are able to write. And how you say that your main everything is writing, I think that statement in and of itself comes full circle in that, like, to me, writing is everything. Writing is life. Writing is communication. Writing is books, obviously. Writing is movies. Writing is TV shows. Writing is communication. Writing is love. Writing is expression. Writing is everything. Writing is coordination. Writing is politics. Writing is health. Writing is truth. Writing is lies. Writing is sharing. So it's definitely dope that you have that. Question 4. How do you get yourself to sit down and do your work when you're not motivated to? And Yvette responded, "This is a hard one for me. When I'm not motivated, sometimes I can go weeks without writing. What has helped me recently is I started reading a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron." I'm going to jot that one down and check it out. Thank you for that recommendation. Where she recommends doing a journal called The Morning Pages. Oh shit. That's so fitting with the writing tip that we went over earlier. I really feel that this helps me get motivated. It opens my creative pathway for the rest of the day by writing away all thoughts in the morning. That's so cool. I'm sure you heard the writing tip at the head of the episode, Yvette, but if you didn't because you found my voice annoying or boring and you just skipped ahead to this part, go back and listen, or just check out the episode notes, and there's an interesting article by James Clear regarding just this journaling and different types of it that you might like and find helpful. And I'm going to return the favor with a book recommendation called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, which is my favorite book, and the book that pretty much got the ball rolling for me in terms of writing. And I read it multiple times, and each time you get something else from it, but it's all about resistance being this actual force that stops you from writing, and in your case, for example, can keep you weeks without writing. It's a force called resistance that is actively doing that, and it gives you like tips and advice on how to overcome that and actually do your work. And again, it's called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, which I will also link to in the episode notes. And lastly, question number 5. Do you have any advice for other writers or creators, whether they're new, seasoned, or otherwise? And Yvette responded, "You are always learning, so accept all advice and tips from anybody because you will never know when it will help you." And I couldn't agree more with that. Don't believe that success will come and find you. You really have to go and work really hard for it. Definitely with you there. Writing is tough. Really tough. In those days where you want to burn everything you've written or give up on writing because you're, quote, not good enough, end quote, remember, we all get these days. We are all the same in that way, and you are good enough. Writing is hard for everyone. Absolutely. Yvette, thanks again for taking the time to filling out the Spun Today questionnaire. I will be emailing you a direct download link for my book, Make Way for You, Tips for Getting Out of Your Own Way. Free of charge, of course, for taking the time to partake in the Spun Today questionnaire. You can use the link to download a copy of my book in any format that you'd like, whether it be Kindle, iBooks, a PDF, whatever works best for you. And obviously, feel free to rate and review it if you enjoy it. Again, folks, if you want to thank Yvette for sharing with the Spun Today community, feel free to reach out on Twitter, which I linked to in the episode notes. She is The Improviser, at The Improviser. And once again, she is Miss Writer, aka YL Gorman, aka Yvette Gorman. Thank you. And last but not least, folks, now it is time to share some of my free writing, which is located on the brand new revamped Spun Today website, specifically at spuntoday.com/free writing. I'm going to be sharing 2 posts with you guys today. One of them is titled, I Have a Gut Feeling, and it was posted on January 22nd, 2019. And the other is titled, It's All About the Moments, and that one was posted on January 21st, 2019. I have a gut feeling. Let me tell you what I know. I know that the answers are inside of us. I don't know how I know, or even what I know, but I know they're there. All of them. The answerable and the unanswerable. Everything there ever was, is, or will be necessary to know. I don't know how to access it all at will. That path is probably different for each of us, but it's worth the journey. I feel it. I'm sure of it. It's as gut and absolute as it gets. Don't take it on faith, because you may stray. Take it as fact and follow through with tact. Be cautious and kind in your journey into you, and share all that was worth finding. We'll elevate each other this way and leave behind a better place to be. Be. And I wrote that on Friday, November 20th, 2015 at 8:56 a.m. So I did a little more of my wannabe Dr. Seuss rhyming stuff. That is a common thread through some of my free writing. With that line that says, take it as fact and follow through with tact. It's kind of corny. I did like that second to last line that says, be cautious and kind in your journey into you, and share all that was worth finding. Be cautious and kind in your journey into you. So, I'm a fan of self-reflection. Obviously, through free writing, that's a big part of what free writing is, self-reflection, meditation, thoughtfulness, being thoughtful about yourself. So that line plays into that type of outlook, which is being cautious and kind in your journey into you. So as you're going deep into yourself, as you're contemplating things about yourself, be cautious and kind. Don't berate yourself. Don't beat yourself up too much. Don't praise yourself. Be cautious and kind to yourself. And once you figure things out, these answers that I'm claiming are there within all of us, share what you think is worth sharing. Other people can benefit from it. And I can't say for sure that I can't completely co-sign with the idea of all answers being inside of each of us, etc. I do feel now that maybe certain things are either unknowable or outside of us. But that's not to say that some of the answers aren't within us. And getting to know ourselves at a deep level helps us in understanding others and understanding ultimately the world and existence. I do definitely believe that there is a oneness between ourselves and existence and the universe. There is something that ties us together. But I don't believe that we're able or capable, even now, of experiencing all of what the unanswerable and unknowable is. But when the time comes, I reckon we will. Alright, the next post is, it's all about the moments. And I wrote, the moments are what count. The moments are what count. They're the only things that do. Submerge yourself and drown in the moment. Let go. Don't resist. Let it happen. Make your contribution and let yourself happen to it. Live your life feeling the synergy of your experiences, how they ebb and flow and intertwine where you never knew they would, where you never knew they could, and come to the realization that that's exactly how they should. Don't miss it just because you're in it. Be in it for the sake of not missing it. Each and every moment will only end when you feel finished, and when it does too. The moment will reciprocate the allowance of coexistence, but it won't tolerate hesitation. If you're in, out wouldn't be an option. If you're out, in will always remain that once upon a time dream, that fantasy that should have, could have, regretful feeling. In the distance, and too far away to consider reaching for. Next time you find yourself on the brink of a moment, don't hesitate and let it sweep you off your feet. You know as well as anyone that you'll regret it if you don't. And I wrote that on Monday, September 28th, 2015 at 2:33 p.m. IST. That's India Standard Time. So I wrote that while in India. So I see a couple good takeaways from this post. Starting with the title, it's all about the moments. I still agree with that. I wouldn't say they're the only thing that count anymore, but I definitely see the thought process behind thinking that at the time, because technically it could break anything and everything down to its independent moments. So I guess it does kind of make sense if you're being uber technical. Submerge yourself and drown in the moment. I think that's a fairly good, healthy approach. Once you have essentials like, like food, shelter, safety out of the way, let go, don't resist, let it happen. I can see that going wrong at times. So I wouldn't wholeheartedly co-sign that. I do really like towards the end of the first paragraph where I wrote, don't miss it just because you're in it. Be in it for the sake of not missing it. So I think we are busy as human beings and have responsibilities and can very much show while being in the process of submerging and drowning in the moment, like I suggested earlier on in that paragraph. You're very susceptible to just missing out in the experience objectively because you're so lost in the minutia of it. And I don't think that's good, because you don't get a full appreciation for it, I think. But on the flip side, you shouldn't let that deter you from being involved, because then if you're not involved, you miss it altogether anyway. So definitely be in it for the sake of not missing it. But try to keep yourself cognizant of the moment that you're in so that you can appreciate it objectively. Kind of did my Dr. Seuss thing again in this one. Not as egregiously, though. Where I say, where you never knew it could, and come to the realization that that's exactly where it should and would, and blah, 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 blah. The last takeaway, positive takeaway that I get from this is the last couple of lines where I write, next time you find yourself on the brink of a moment, don't hesitate and let it sweep you off your feet. you know as well as anyone that you'll regret it if you don't. And that's just for all the times that you don't carpe diem, seize the day, and do something or say something that you wanted to do or say, and then kick yourself over it after the fact. So that's something I could still co-sign. But that's pretty much all I got, guys and gals. I hope you enjoyed episode 118 of the Spun Today Podcast.